Okay. Good morning, everybody. So hopefully you can hear me okay, and I think I'll start with a couple of disclosures or disclaimers, I'm not sure which. So firstly, I'm not Robert Glanzman. I guess that bit's a little bit evident. Dr. Glanzman, who's with Alexion, unfortunately for personal reasons, at the last minute just couldn't make his way from the East Coast to be here in San Diego. His loss and certainly my gain. Dr. Glanzman, he's a medical doctor. So second disclosure is I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a doctor by research. And I work with Alexion. I joined just about 18 months ago. But really my career has been in working in the pharmaceutical industry and specifically working in developing new treatments and hence clinical trials. And I think then the third disclosure is, as I go through the slides, you'll find them, they are very much weighted, I would say, to the Alexion trial in myasthenia gravis. But my hope and aspiration over the next 10 or 15 minutes is really to use it to more illustrate some of the areas to know, to understand that John actually outlined and articulated so incredibly eloquently. You had such a disclaimer, no background in clinical trials, but it was a truly impressive overview. So I've got a little bit of a hard act to follow. So I'll just start with a few words about Alexion, actually, because one of the terms you'll have heard is sponsor. What is a sponsor and who is a sponsor? And I know John touched on this a little bit, where you can have pharmaceutical companies who sponsor clinical trials. You can have other bodies such as NIH who sponsor clinical trials. And you can have physicians, investigators. Just at dinner last evening, I know we heard about Dr. Gil Wolfe and his involvement in the thymectomy trial. So the sponsor can be different entities, but for the purpose of the trial that will come through in this presentation, the sponsor is Alexion. And Alexion is a pretty small biopharmaceutical company. It was established in the early 1990s, so it's been going now about 23 years. And it is a company with a relentless and unequivocal focus on rare disease and a commitment to really developing and introducing treatments that will have an impact and a benefit to patients. At the moment, there's one drug on the market. It is eculizumab. It is approved for two other indications. One is a disease of the blood system, the red blood cells, PNH for short, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. Now you see why I say PNH. And then the other disease, atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome. And the reason why I highlighted that is really to illustrate, as I talk about eculizumab, it's not approved for myasthenia gravis, to just really make that very clear. It's not currently approved for myasthenia gravis, but that is the direction we hope to go to. So John covered this a little bit as well, as what are the reasons that any one of us may want to consider in whether or not we want to participate in a clinical trial. And sometimes it's when there are running out of options or no other options, or the therapy that you're currently receiving isn't serving you well, it's failing you. Others can, and these are not mutually exclusive, the personal reason to help advance medical knowledge with trials, and I think this was touched on, there's a very intense follow-up and there's a high level of medical engagement, and obviously as well to take a more active role in your healthcare. And this slide highlights the first number one with a different shade, when other treatment options have failed, because this really gets to the focus of the current Alexion trial in myasthenia gravis, where myasthenia gravis, being the disease, not everyone is well served by their current treatments, and some patients will continue to experience very significant muscle weakness despite their treatment. And this is a further subset of the myasthenic patient group. And there are currently no approved therapies, certainly here in the US or in Europe, for therapies that really tackle the underlying cause of the disease. So that's been the focus really of the Alexion trial, which is called the REGAIN study. Again, thinking, why might I want to participate in a clinical trial? Well, one of the things that is important to understand, what is the purpose of the trial? What is it trying to achieve? Why should I even consider it? So if I take that as the framework, for the eculizumab trial, this is a research study which will investigate the safety and the potential benefits of eculizumab in patients with MG who are not responding well to their existing MG medication. The eculizumab itself is a monoclonal antibody, and so again, how is it going to work in the body? Well, it's going to work in the immune system, and we've heard a lot between today and yesterday about MG, and obviously it being an autoimmune disease. And as mentioned, it's not currently approved for the treatment of MG, but that really is the focus of the current clinical trial. So with any clinical trial, it's, well, why might this drug work? What is the reason to believe? What is the foundation for thinking that this drug might bring the benefit that you think it will? So if I take the eculizumab just as a simple example, we heard a lot about yesterday with the patients with the acetylcholine receptor antibodies and the binding at the neuromuscular junction and the impairment of the muscle the nerve transmission that leads to the muscle weakness. Well, that in part is driven by the activation of part of the immune system called complement. And complement is a critical part for all of us in managing our immunity. But in MG, where you have this binding of the acetylcholine receptor antibody to the receptors on the muscle, you get this activation of complement. So then what is the basis of a trial with eculizumab? Well, very specifically, eculizumab inhibits the formation of the complement that causes the damage. And it's when you get that damage that you get that impaired transmission from the nerve cell to the muscle that produces the weakness. So that's then the rationale for why eculizumab might be beneficial in MG. But of course, we need to do the clinical trial. John touched very nicely that there's different stages of clinical trials. And so one of the questions that you will want to consider is, how much is known about this drug? How much has it been studied in other clinical trials? Indeed, does it presently exist for patients in other disease areas? And so for the eculizumab trial at the moment, we describe it as a phase 3 trial. And really what you see on the slide is when John was describing the phase 2, which are typically very much smaller studies that really focus on safety, but they're also designed to have an early look to determine whether there's a potential benefit. And there was such a trial with eculizumab in 14 patients. And on the back of that data, the decision was made to go into a large phase 3 trial. And in conducting a large phase 3 trial, the goal is, if the data supports a benefit and a manageable and an acceptable toleration and safety profile, bringing that data forward to health authorities around the world, including here in the US, the FDA, to seek approval for that drug based on the strength of the data. So the goal of the phase 3 study is to really take the results from the phase 2 and now to investigate and confirm the safety and the potential benefits of eculizumab in patients with refractory myasthenia gravis. Again, all trials, they have criteria around eligibility, and this was touched on a little bit yesterday as well, because obviously patients can be very different. And even already I've mentioned about the acetylcholine receptor, which not the muscle-specific kinase or the MuSK, the MuSK receptors or the MuSK patients. But all trials have eligibility criteria. So again, considering in the context of the eculizumab trial, it would be patients who are adult patients with the diagnosis of generalized disease, again, that are positive to the acetylcholine receptor antibody. And why? Well, it's because it's linked to the complement activation that's responsible for, we believe, responsible for the disease and the upsetting of the muscle and that impaired transmission and the muscle weakness. So then the rationale for eculizumab being able to basically block the activated complement. And again, with patients who are still experiencing weakness despite therapies, and we call refractory, and for the purpose of the study, we've defined this in concert with discussions with a lot of the neurologists, I'm sure you know well, but failure with at least 2 immunosuppressives, or alternatively 1, and receiving IVIG or plasma exchange regularly. In addition to having criteria for eligibility to be included in the study, there are also criteria that would not make an individual a potential suitable candidate for the study. And so some examples for the eculizumab study would be a history of thymoma or thymectomy within the past 12 months. We also don't permit in the trial, because of a potential overlap in mechanism of action, we don't permit the use of rituximab. And also it's don't permit solely ocular MG. So again, you know, one thing actually I haven't really touched on is the informed consent, which is remiss of me because I'm now up to slide 10. But before going into any clinical trial, there's an informed consent process. And this is a really, really key step. If I think of the eculizumab, we provide an explanation of the trial. This is obviously reviewed by the IRBs, the ethics committees, etc. But it's a document that really is to inform on the trial. What will it mean? What will it take? How often will I have to come to the clinic? What sort of procedures will be conducted? How will I get to the clinic? Will I be reimbursed for getting to the clinic? What happens if I no longer want to participate in the study? Provides a lot of information. And it's very important to take the time to really read, digest, understand, and anything you don't understand or not clear, to follow up and have your questions answered. But if you are eligible to participate and decide to enroll in the study, and with informed consent, in the eculizumab trial, it's a blinded study, and by that we mean that neither you nor the physician, frankly myself for the ongoing trial, we do not know what treatment you would be assigned to. It's blinded. But it's half of the patients will receive what we call the active medication, the eculizumab, and half will be receiving placebo. For the eculizumab trial, this is also something to consider in clinical trials more broadly. What does it mean for my existing treatment? Do I have to stop it? Do I have to discontinue? Do I have to change the dose? Am I allowed to continue on my treatment? And so for the eculizumab trial, when you would ask that question, is described as an add-on study. In other words, you may be able to continue to take your existing medication. I've mentioned that rituximab isn't permitted, but your other medication you could take. And then when going into the stages of the study, there will be a period after you've discussed the study with your doctor, whether it's you're potentially eligible, you're still interested, and you sign the consent. Then you go into a screening period. And for the eculizumab trial, this can last anything from 2 to 4 weeks. And at the end of that, during that time, it's really the time to understand your medical history, collect what we call baseline data, do some tests, to establish your baseline medical status. And also, as I'll come on to eculizumab, when I speak to safety, there's a vaccination requirement as well. And then at the conclusion of the screening, there's a randomization. And again, half of patients on the eculizumab, half on placebo. In other trials, the randomization can be different. It can be maybe what we call 2 to 1. Twice as many patients will receive active versus placebo. And then the study will last for a period of time. The eculizumab trial is 26 weeks. and then there will be follow-up at the end of that period. So one of the important components, and again, really to getting to the stage of really having an informed decision on whether or not this is a trial that I'm still interested in, whether or not it's the trial that's for me, what it will mean, is also understanding the potential risks and side effects. So all drugs, as we develop drugs, we're developing them for benefit, but a very, very important component is the toleration, the side effect profile. So if I speak a little bit on this slide to the risks of eculizumab, I've described eculizumab as a drug that inhibits complement, and it's that activity to inhibit complement that we believe is foundational to bringing the potential benefit. But that ability to inhibit complement also creates a known risk. And one of the known risks is the risk of meningococcal infection. So when I described that 2 to 4 week screening period, a key part of the trial procedures during that screening period is for all patients to be vaccinated for meningococcal infection. Another consideration when you're thinking about a clinical trial and how much is known about the drug to begin with, how much is known either in the same disease area or in other disease areas. So eculizumab, while it's a trial in MG, there is other indications where it's approved, so there is a body of data to inform on the safety. And what this slide shows is the most frequently reported adverse reactions. And this would all be information that would be captured in the informed consent as well. And it's very, very important to the overall decision making. So if I can just hopefully I've tried or I've managed to try and use the eculizumab trial as a framework, as sort of all the conceptual and important points that John brought out in the first presentation, things to consider, and tried to sort of provide a specific case as to how it might apply to that eculizumab trial. But of course, as there's other trials, and as we bring up the information on the screen around other trials in clinicaltrials.gov, it would be those same types of questions that you would be looking for. But just to summarize the study, I've touched on the basis of determining whether or not the trial might be the right for me in terms of whether I might be eligible. So that really is described in the first bullet around the muscle weakness. Why do I think the drug might even work? So I've tried to address, certainly for eculizumab, but it would be relevant to all trials. Why do I think that drug might work? Does there previous data in the patient population? Does previous data exist to actually indicate that it could be effective? And what information is available around the phase 3 data? And how much information is available in safety? And then what will this data be used for? Well, the study's ongoing. It's blinded. When the study completes and we lock our database, and the database has to be locked before we will apply the unblinding. If the data supports it, is our goal, our aim, to really move forward to meet with health authorities globally to try and bring forward eculizumab as an approved treatment. And one point actually I haven't covered, it's that last bullet. Frequently a very relevant question is, well, what happens at the end of the clinical trial? Will I have access to the drug? Well, I mentioned, for example, eculizumab isn't approved in MG, but at the end of that six-month double-blind study, all patients who participate in the trial will have the opportunity to consider and to go into what we call an open label extension. And by that we mean it's a separate clinical trial protocol, but it's for the patients who complete the double-blind trial, where everyone would receive open label eculizumab. And just a final point, we'll go through the information that's available on clinicaltrials.gov. There's also information where Alexion created in the past I think 9 months actually, a website where information is available on certain clinical trials, including Regain. But there's also downloadable material, questions I should consider when going to see my doctor, reasons to participate in clinical trial, some information about the disease. So if you have time or opportunity, and there's brochures outside, they also provide the website to give more information. Thank you.